Nukatashi 1 and 2 are visual novels developed by newer company Krupo. They first released in Japan in 2018 and 2019 respectively, and both have since become two of my favorite visual novels ever. In this video, I'm going to briefly talk about why I love these two visual novels and why I highly recommend reading them. Starting with the original Nukatashi, which has since become a top 3 favorite visual novel of mine since I've read. This is one of the most consistently funny and engaging visual novels I've read, period. The visual novel has a strong plot, but I wouldn't compare it to other serious visual novel plots like Fate Stay Night, Fullmetal Daemon, Muramasa, and Love Alternative. I consider it more like Agave from Majikoi. Nukatashi is a mix of a goofy setting and humor. In particular, it's a parody on Nukige or sex-heavy stories, while also having serious character development, well-paced, shonen-like action scenes, and surprising amount of character depth. When you consider that I just compared it to Agave from Majikoi, which is my favorite route from my favorite visual novel ever, obviously that means I put Nukatashi 1 in high praise. Similar to Majikoi, I like how Nukatashi properly blended this humorous and clearly unrealistic setting, but also kind of deconstructed it to a degree, showing the circumstances of forcing people into abiding by an enforced law requiring everyone in high school and above to have sex publicly and punching them if they don't. That said, if seeing a bunch of random background characters just casually going at it and saying goofy lines while doing it puts you off, I would not recommend you reading this visual novel because there'll be a lot of those. One of the absolute highest praises I have to give to Nukatashi 1 in particular is its pacing. Earlier, I mentioned that one of the aspects of this visual novel I really like is how it uses its action scenes. Part of the main plot is using these action scenes as a way for the main characters' group to rebel against the enforced sex law and having creative ways of them escaping from this enforced sex. The way it mixes well-paced action scenes along with creative weapons like using a dildo as hard as a sword or masturbation eggs as smoke screens and flashbangs were part of what makes Nukatashi both hilarious yet engaging. Speaking of the main characters rebelling, I personally love the main group of characters who call themselves NLNS or No Love, No Sex. All of them have a variety of hilarious and charming personalities, great interactions with each other, mostly humorous, but can get surprisingly serious and deep at times, depending on the route. To me, the NLNS is the lifeblood of the series, even in the lowest parts. As long as at least a couple of the NLNS characters are on screen, I'm having a blast reading. Naturally, this extends to Nukatashi 1's routes, which focus on each major NLNS girl minus Asane since there's no little sister route yet. I really liked how each route has its own unique themes, plot twists, major antagonists, and even different tones. Some routes are more serious than others, while others are more humorous. I've seen people who dislike Misaki's route in particular, but I personally quite liked it myself because of how ridiculous and over the top it got in terms of humor, even compared to the rest of the series. That said, there is no doubt the true route that is unlocked after finishing the original 3 is the best, as it essentially combines the best aspects of the first 3 routes while also having some great reveals and unique themes on its own. By the end of the story, I found every single major character likable or interesting, including the antagonists. Some with who are not supposed to like at first, which does go into one of the interesting themes of Nukatashi 1, eventually coming around to things you initially dislike. It's been forever since I've given one to a full-length visual novel, but the original Nukatashi absolutely deserves a 10 out of 10 for me, since I love just about everything about it. Any flaws I have with it are basically nitpicky. Moving on to the sequel, I'm going to briefly start by saying I had the privilege of doing a full paid software QA test run of Nukatashi 2. I'm heavily grateful I got to do this at least once for an official visual novel English release, especially for a sequel to one of my top 3 visual novels of all time. Now, do I think Nukatashi 2 is good? Definitely. Do I think it's really good? Yeah, potentially a top 10 visual novel even. Now, I think it's better than the original Nukatashi? Not quite, but I can absolutely see the hype people have for it though. When Nukatashi 2 is at its best, I would definitely say it has a case of being better than the original in certain aspects. The main positive I would give for Nukatashi 2 over 1 is that his humor is somehow even funnier. Since there's a lot more slice of life in Nukatashi 2, they focus way more on the jokes, and they are even more over the top, with more specific, unique, memorable moments than even the original, which I already thought was really funny. Pretty much anything related to the NLNS, both the characters and their after-story routes, were consistently great for me. Once again, these characters and their interactions were the lifeblood of the series and why I love Nukatashi so much. The personalities are as great as ever, and a few even get more development than I expected. One unique thing about Nukatashi 2 is that it actually covered LGBT themes, all 4 letters, in a surprisingly kind of nuanced way, actually delving into the psychology of said characters as opposed to just being half-assed representation or weeb pandering fetishism. The main issue that makes it just kinda nuanced is that all the deep dives into the personalities eventually devolves into eroge fan service. Still, this is the most that I got personally invested into fictional LGBT characters, which is saying a lot of why I like Nukatashi 2. I think the main thing many people are hyped for in Nukatashi 2 is the main sequel route. Without delving into too much major spoilers, it's kind of a weird parody on a parallel world isekai, similar to Higurashi Rei, Steins Gate, ReZero, etc. This parallel world isekai takes place after the true route of Nukatashi 1, with the possibility, this is an annoying detail for me personally, that Junosuke did not get with the true route heroine. I wasn't a fan of this isekai premise since it's a bad excuse to almost overwrite the true end of the original. I also thought many times throughout this sequel route, it felt like a half-assed way to give the big 3 a reason to have routes. This sequel route isn't all bad though. In fact, I would say objectively, quote-unquote, it's actually quite solid, having good build-up, serious themes, good comedy, and fight scenes. I just think some of the enjoyment was brought down by the stuff I just complained about. Speaking of the big 3, I'm guessing another reason people are hyped for this sequel is because they actually get routes. While I wasn't a fan of the isekai premise, I did at least commend the effort of Junosuke actually having camaraderie and interactions with these big 3 characters in the sequel route, so them getting routes could actually make sense. Sadly, I was very disappointed in the big 3 and their routes. Rei already had her backstory in the original, so there's only so much they could have done with her in the sequel. Her route was still decent, yet unfortunately, it just ended up being the best of the 3 by circumstance. Toka got a little more backstory and depth, but they also added a few more comedy gimmicks about her, which I thought were just kind of boring and lame. I never liked Ikuko to begin with, and outside of learning her backstory, her and her route just didn't make me like her any more than I already did. In fact, my feelings on Ikuko after her route were even more mixed. I also think that Nukatashi 2 was just slightly more inconsistent quality-wise. The original Nukatashi did a great job combining the comedy, slice of life, action, and drama aspects in a well-paced, cohesive package. Nukatashi 2, as said earlier, is not only funnier than Nukatashi 1, but it might even be the funniest visual novel I've ever read. The comedy is just even more over the top, as said earlier, than usual, and I love it. However, since Nukatashi 2 is a sequel, many of the main plot threads from Nukatashi 1 have been solved, meaning there's a lot more slice of life scenes than usual, which also means that a lot of the enjoyment will heavily depend on how much you like the character route you're currently reading. There are still great action scenes here and there, however they're just much less frequent and basically only happen in certain moments in the main sequel route. A few final fights in the main sequel route are some of my favorites in the series, but most of the others I just didn't consider as fun and engaging as the original. Overall, I would say I quite like Nukatashi 2 still, but it just has a bunch of inconsistent flaws that make me not like it as much as the original. That said, I definitely say it's worth reading, especially if you like the comedy and want to see more content for your favorite characters. Just keep in mind there's a lot of weird route locking in Nukatashi 2, so you might have to read other routes first before you read one of your favorites. If I had to give a score to Nukatashi 2, I'd give it about an 8.5, rounded up to a 9, because it has my favorite comedy in visual novels, especially Misaki, who might be the funniest character in visual novels at the moment. Now that I've touched on both Nukatashi visual novels individually, I'm going to talk about some miscellaneous thoughts I have on the series as a whole that I didn't cover in the individual sections. I want to start off by talking about the music in the series. I'm not going to lie, it's really addicting. It has this really unique jazzy kind of feel that I don't see or hear too often in visual novels. Here's a sample of a few of my favorites from both visual novels. I guess I'm just a sucker for piano because between both the energetic jazzy songs for fight scenes, the quirky songs for comedic scenes, and the lighter piano pieces for more emotional scenes, I just love the soundtrack so much because of how well piano and other instruments are used. Now I'm going to talk about the main protagonist, Junosuke Tachibana. He's a pretty solid protagonist overall. Even in the first game, I liked how he most definitely has a personality being very ambitious, but can also switch off between a goofy incel, but can also play the straight man to the other characters' antics. That said, in the original Nukatashi, He can be a little bit of a hypocritical douche at times, and can be especially mean to Nanase for no reason. Thankfully, Junosuke is at his absolute best in the sequel, Nukatashi 2. Since every route has almost all the character development he got in the original, he is much more consistently likable and helps take part in the main theme of understanding, while still himself at the core. Overall, after reading both visual novels, Junosuke might be in my top 5 favorite visual novel protagonists. I'm going to use this last main section to quickly rank all 8 major heroines from my personal least favorite to my personal highest favorite. Even after both stories, I'm honestly not a fan of Ikiko. She has some interesting moments here and there, but I tend to find her more annoying than not. Toka started off interesting, but once you got to know more about her, I just thought she was kind of boring, if not kind of annoying. Rei was certainly well developed, especially compared to most of the other characters. I just didn't find her base personality particularly fun or interesting. It took the sequel to actually make her kind of funny. Nanase is a huge step up over Rei. She's my least favorite of the NL and S girls, but she's definitely still likable and has an interesting past. She's just not as funny or as memorable as the others above her. I thought Fumino was quite solid. I kind of wish they didn't take so long to reveal her name, and I wish she was just around more often, but I liked her story development and humor well enough. Asane is certainly a character that naturally appeals to me personality-wise. She's a quirky computer nerd that has a lot of funny ramblings, and the fact that she's lesbian does provide some unique humor. I just wish she had more development outside of particular major moments in the sequel. Hinami is definitely a very solid character on average, generally switching off being the most mature character of the group, while also having some quirks about how she's totally not a lolly. She's mostly my second favorite character because she has some of the most memorable, wholesome moments in both Nukatashis. Finally, Misaki was pretty easily my favorite heroine in the whole series. She definitely fits my taste the most, as she's by far the weirdest and funniest character in the whole series, and may possibly be the funniest character I've seen in any visual novel to date, especially in the second Nukatashi. Thankfully, Misaki is rounded out by having some depth, although relatively minor. And that concludes my thoughts on the Nukatashi series. Considering Kurupo was able to knock it out of the park twice in a row for their first 2 visual novels they've ever made, I think the visual novel scene is looking bright, at least for them as an eroge company, especially since Hentai Prison, also by them, is apparently even better. I hope through this video I at least helped you consider reading the Nukatashi series, because they are definitely some of the most unique visual novels I've read to date, with an excellent mix of comedy, great character interactions, surprisingly well-paced fight scenes, and equally surprising character depth. Feel free to leave your thoughts on the Nukatashi series or this video in the comment sections below.